Last year it was announced the KDE LTS is dead. Frankly, it wasn't really alive in the first place. It was kind of just held on by a thread. Almost nobody was using it. Pretty much just Kubuntu. Maybe there were some random little distros here and there, but Kubuntu was the only notable one. Others that it might have made sense for, like Debian or OpenSUSE Leap, just didn't care. They just did their own thing. Also, it wasn't really an LTS. They only backported patches for Plasma. They weren't doing it for frameworks, which are the KDE libraries, and they weren't doing it for Gear, which is the KDE applications. So it was an LTS in name for the desktop, and that is all. Also, when it came to the backporting of patches anyway, there wasn't really any rhyme or reason in which patches were actually backported. They weren't doing any proper validation, there wasn't any sort of continuous integration, any sort of proper testing, so it wasn't like Ubuntu LTS or RHEL where there was a serious effort in ensuring that users who relied on the LTS actually got something that made sense to stay back on an older version. Instead, what you got was pretty much something that was identical to an old version of KDE, except they picked the old version it was going to be, and you had a slightly more patched Plasma. That was all. So it didn't really make any sense. No one was using it. They weren't even developing it properly anyway, so instead of doing that, at the time, they decided to increase the support period for an additional 2 months, going from 4 up to 6 months. But it doesn't have to be like that, and going forward, it won't be any longer. What a real LTS looks like, Ubuntu 2604 from Nate Graham. An actual, real LTS version is not even just being worked on, is out now. You can use it. Plasma 6.6 is now an LTS version, but not just Plasma itself. KDE Framework 6.24 and also Gear 25.12 will all have patches backported to them. This is now actually doing things at least somewhat sensibly. This didn't just come out of nowhere. This is work being sponsored by Kubuntu Focus. Who is Kubuntu Focus? Well, if we go to the KDE website when it decides it wants to load, right down the bottom here, you might notice the KDE patrons. One of them right about, where are they? Right here. Kubuntu Focus, one of their big patrons. They are a company that does Kubuntu validation and actually sells devices that have Kubuntu on them. So if you want to get yourself a laptop or a mini PC or various different, some swag, the swag is not running Kubuntu, sadly, but anything else, you can buy these devices. Then with the money they get from that, they support KDE directly and also directly support the Kubuntu project as well, and in this case, go and sponsor the work through Tech Paladin. Tech Paladin is the same company that has taken on the Valve contract for doing KDE work as well. This used to be at Blue Systems, then there was drama falling out. I don't exactly know the full details. Some of that stuff is private. Nate Graham, who is the person who wrote this post, went to go and start Tech Paladin, brought some people with him, and now we have this company. We are not just backporting bug fixes that happen to get made, but rather actively work with the Kubuntu folks to identify and fix pain points experienced by them and their users. Plasma 6.6 will thus remain eligible for bug reports for the next 3 years, and we'll do our best to get them fixed and backported. Finally, Kubuntu Focus is sponsoring additional continuous integration resources owned by KDE EV to handle the load of validating changes made to these older versions, and they've been generous enough to sponsor more than was strictly needed for the initiative, so KDE in general benefits from faster CI times, even for non-LTS work. We are calling the whole thing the Bulletproof KDE Initiative. Much like the investment from the Sovereign Tech Fund, which is earmarked for a certain kind of work, in this case, with very much an enterprise kind of spin to it, a lot of this work is going to trickle down into what just regular KDE users are using. But also in this case, whilst we're talking about Kubuntu Focus and Kubuntu and all this stuff, this is not just about Kubuntu. This is Plasma 6.6 in general. Yes, Kubuntu is using it. Yes, that is the place that you can install it from right now. But this is not locked to Kubuntu. This is still KDE. This is still open source. Everything is still happening in the repo. So if you want to go use it, if a distro wants to go use it, like, all of that stuff is still totally available. This is what a real LTS initiative looks like, folks. People involved in an OS putting the resources into making a non-LTS upstream release into an LTS one properly, with bug fixes, not just security fixes, backported to all levels of the software stack, not just the top one. So I predict Kubuntu 26.04 promises to offer the best KDE experience of any Kubuntu release ever, which granted is not exactly a very high bar, because Kubuntu is not exactly well known for having great releases, and is always quite well known for being, let's just say, a little bit out of date for far, far too long. How long was it until they swapped over to Plasma 6? Quite a bit longer than they should have been. One thing you might recall is Nate writing this article here, long-term support doesn't mean what you think. This is from May 23rd, 2026, and this is a great article, but in retrospect, this work here was probably already in progress when this was being written, even though he does kind of talk shit about Kubuntu just a tiny little bit here. This was probably already being worked on, and I would assume the Kubuntu guys, like, knew this was a problem. Now, there are some, let's call them FAQ-style questions towards the bottom of the article, or concerns, one might say. So you're a sellout who changes his opinion about LTS due to money. My opinion remains the same. I don't dislike LTS products, only fake ones that promise support but don't actually deliver it. With this initiative, users of Kubuntu 26.04 get a real LTS product with real support backed by a pair of commercial companies. This is the problem with a lot of things that call themselves LTS. It is LTS in name, but the organization backing it doesn't actually have anyone who's LTSing. They don't have anyone who is backporting patches, who is worrying about all of these things that are going on with these older versions, especially so when it's these, like, longer LTS cycles, the kind of things that both Canonical and Red Hat do, where it's like 10-year cycles. If you don't have dedicated developers working on that, you don't really have an LTS. You have something which gives people this impression that it's going to be well supported, but in reality, you might as well just run an old version. So this is a commercial thing. KDE gone corporate? Corporate with a K? Oh my god. It's largely a commercial initiative between Kubuntu Focus and Tech Paladin Software, yes. Though KDE EV has signed off on the initiative and agreed to accept funding for the new CI resources. Both companies are good citizens in the KDE ecosystem, KDE EV patrons, employees of engineers you've heard of, and providers of hardware and services to users of KDE software, and the benefits accrue far beyond just the companies. Obviously, Kubuntu 26.04 users benefit, even those who didn't buy a computer from Kubuntu Focus, and as I mentioned earlier, all of KDE now has more general-purpose CI resources. Also, many of the LTS bugs that Tech Paladin people have already fixed were affecting people on later Plasma versions too. Everyone wins here. So the commercial part is no limitation on what anyone else gets for free or is allowed to do. It's just an acknowledgement that creating a real LTS product costs money. Down in the replies, a few people reasonably asked, what about Qt? If KDE relies on Qt and Qt is not being patched, well, you still have issues that are going to be introduced by Qt. From Nate, I've been informed that Qt security fixes are backported as part of the Ubuntu Pro subscription, which is free for a certain number of machines. So anyone concerned about this who uses Ubuntu on 1 or 2 personal machines, that sounds like a reasonable solution. Basically, it's not KDE's problem to deal with, that's on the distro. Kubuntu itself, they need to deal with the Qt stuff, KDE is going to deal with the KDE stuff. Over in the press release for this, there are a couple of very minor additional details. One of those being a 100k commitment for stability and reliability to spearhead this initiative. Kubuntu Focus has committed over $100,000 in direct payments to Tech Paladin, KDE and developers over 3 years. Whilst this doesn't sound like a crazy amount of money, yes, 100,000 is a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money over 3 years for developers. This is not something where you need, 24/7 development where every day your work is going to be dedicated to just this one task. Backporting patches to an older version is something that sort of comes and goes, and there's going to be things that get discovered, there's going to be testing that is done. It's not something you dedicate your entire time to. KDE already offers one of the fastest, most mature, efficient, and feature-rich desktop software suites available. This initiative takes its long-term support to the next level and makes switching from a closed-source OS a much more compelling option for many users and organizations. We are proud to be part of this effort. As I said before, right now this is just being used by Kubuntu. If you go to Kubuntu's download page, you can literally just download it right now. The version of Plasma that is on Kubuntu is 6.6. This is the version that is still getting updates. This is the version that is the LTS. You can literally just use it right now. You're not going to notice the difference because it's literally just the LTS. Like, there's nothing special about it from, like, a different install of 6.6. Frankly, it's very similar to 6.7, minus some additional things that do get added that, not important. We're getting side tangent here. The better question, rather than can other distros use it, is will they actually use it? Others in a position where it might make sense, like Debian or OpenSUSE Leap, just never did so with the prior LTS. But I guess maybe something like Mint could package it, because Mint does actually have KDE available. It's not a thing most people use, but they do just have a version of KDE available, so it might make more sense to do that rather than just have a really old, out-of-date version. I don't know. They probably won't. Frankly, they're probably not going to, and for a while, probably nothing is going to really happen in this space. But there is one group of regular users who would really benefit from this being a thing. People that are not yet ready to make use of the Wayland version. Plasma 6.8 is scheduled for release early next year, and that release is fully dropping the X11 session. Whilst it's not the 6.7 release, which did add additional things like better workspace support and other things like that, the current version that Plasma is right now, 6.6 is still something. So if you really want to stick on KDE, you don't want to go with one of the forks like Sonic DE or switch to something else entirely, the LTS might at the very least be worth just looking at. Maybe you don't use it, but at least looking at and considering maybe this is the thing I should go with. KDE LTS plus what is going on with the Sovereign Tech Fund work. Look, I don't know where things are going. What I do know, however, is there was a time that RHEL shipped Plasma. And that time wasn't even that long ago. That was only a couple of years ago. Hey, if there's an LTS version, and the LTS version could maybe get some support from Red Hat if Red Hat decided they wanted to bring things back, we could, who knows? Who knows where things are going? All I can say right now is we're in for a really good time in the KDE space. It seems like a lot of good work is happening, a lot of big improvements are being made, a lot of money is flowing around, and for once in open source, people are actually getting paid. Not everyone? Sure, not everyone. But a lot more people than definitely were in the past. So, let me know. Would you consider running the LTS version? Are you running it right now? Are you on Kubuntu right now and you just didn't even realize there was an LTS version? I would love to know. So if you liked the video, go like the video, go subscribe as well. If you're on mobile, go and hype the video. And if you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe, Silly Bearpay, link in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and it's a long way to the shop.
something like this.